You're listening to Graveyard Show Classic.
Good evening, friends of the undead. I am the Deacon of Darkness, the posthumous pimp. Freakshow!
And I am the Diva of Dismemberment, Mistress of the Blade, June the Meat Cleaver, from the Bordello of Horror.
You're getting your freak on with the Caretaker on the Graveyard Show.
Step into the graveyard with the Caretaker at graveyardshow.com. That is graveyardshow.com.
Podcast number 62, March 25th, 2010.
Hi, this is Corpse S. Chris from the Horror Host Graveyard. I am listening to the Graveyard Show, another nice dirt-filled place that we both live in.
Welcome to the Graveyard. Enter the Graveyard every Thursday night, midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific. And now, coming to you from Los Angeles, please welcome your host, the Caretaker.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your Caretaker, and the Graveyard is open. As I finish out the month of March, a month that we dedicated to Vampira Tribute as well as horror hosts. If you missed any of the shows, well, definitely go back and check it out on iTunes or on our website, graveyardshow.com. We began the month by talking to Jason Hignite from Dark Carnival, who is the event coordinator for this weekend's Vampira Tribute that is coming to Indianapolis, Indiana, March 26th, 27th, 28th. It is an event of a lifetime. If you are going, I am envious. It is going to be awesome. 80-plus horror hosts gathering at this event. You're going to have other horror guests showing up to Horror Hound Weekend. There's going to be just awesome stuff going on this weekend, and Jason filled us in earlier in the month as to what you can find at Horror Hound Weekend and what you can expect at this year's Vampira Tribute presented by Dark Carnival. Also had a couple of horror hosts on our show. Michael Monahan, Dr. Goulfinger, as well as last week's guest, Count Gore Dyszel. Great interviews. And I wrap out the month of March with a fellow caretaker who has his own graveyard. Corpse S. Chris is here to talk about Vampira Tribute, his website, horrorhostgraveyard.com. It's going to be great. I cannot wait to have him on the program. It's been about a year in the making. It's going to be just awesome. So Corpse S. Chris will be here in a few minutes to talk about, well, horror hosts. Now, as I mentioned, Vampira Tribute this weekend in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's going to be awesome. And I did say, if you are going, I am envious. Now, those of you that aren't going, such as myself, there is an event happening that we can check out. And if you pay attention, you will hear our friend Freakshow from the Bordello of Horror and Vivacious Vivian. They're going to give you the details as to how you can find it.
Hello, friends of the undead. I'm Freakshow and the always vivacious Vivian from Bordello of Horror. Join me and dozens of other horror hosts like Helena, the Hussy of Horror, Count Gore, or Ms. Monster, the weekend of March 26th for a 3-day-long marathon of monster movies.
That's right. March 26th, 27th, and 28th we'll be showing over 30 monster movies in a row. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Classic movies, new movies, scary, gory movies. Some for the whole family and some not so much. It's okay. We're showing those movies really late.
Now, each movie will be introduced by a horror host like me, Penny Dreadful, Miss Misery, or Dr. Goulfinger, just like horror hosts have been doing for the last 60 years.
It's all going to kick off the 100 Years of Monster Movie Celebration, a year-long multimedia event celebrating the 100th birthday of our favorite movie genre.
Here's the best part. We're doing it live, just like they used to in the early days of that ancient medium known as television. Live from the Horror Hound Weekend Convention in Indianapolis.
But you won't find it on any TV network or cable system. It's all streaming online. You can watch it from your computer, mobile phone, or any web-enabled device.
That's right, just log on to 100yearsofmonstermovies.com or just 100ymm.com. If you're among the spelling challenged, anytime from Friday, March 26th at 5 o'clock p.m. through Sunday, March 28th at 9 o'clock p.m. and tune into the most outrageous non-stop marathon of monster movies ever.
For more information, log on to 100yearsofmonstermovies.com or 100ymm.com. Friend us on Facebook, watch our YouTube channel, join us for the greatest celebration of monster movies ever.
All right, thank you, Freakshow. Thank you, Vivian. That is going to be quite a cool event that you can find online. And of course, if you want to get all the details, you can go to horrorhoundweekend.com. That's horrorhoundweekend.com is the place to go. You can get all the links to all the events that are going on, as well as you can go to vampiratribute.com as well. So we're not going to waste any time here. News and notes on the other side. First, I will kick it off with a fellow caretaker who has his own graveyard. I'm talking, of course, about Corpse S. Chris, followed by Brian Amide from Wildclaw Theater. I will see you on the other side. Enjoy. And it is a real thrill to have the man behind the website horrorhostgraveyard.com. He's gone from his graveyard to my graveyard, and it really is a thrill to have Corpse S. Chris to be on this program. Chris, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Howdy, it's a pleasure. It's a graveyard away from home.
Yes, well, let's talk about your website, horrorhostgraveyard.com. You've had it now for a few years. For those that have not seen your website, what can you tell them about horrorhostgraveyard.com?
Well, the website is the only website out there that deals with every horror host, past, present, sometimes even the future ones. It has clips that I've gathered from the internet, pictures, merchandise reviews, which is the only place that actually reviews horror host related merchandise. I make my own too. I have the Horror Host Graveyard trading cards. It's basically a one-stop shop to know anything about horror hosts. If there's somebody that's coming out soon and they have a clip or some pictures, it'll be up there, and you'll be able to find out about when they're going to premiere, sometimes major events, sometimes the ones that have just passed that I could find information on. So it's really the one place where you can find pretty much everything about horror hosts.
Mm-hmm. So what came first, your love of horror and then horror hosts, or did you find horror by way of horror hosts?
I grew up with monsters and horror. My dad really introduced me to that. They used to buy me all the, the Aurora models, the monster toys. He grew up with Zachary. And living in New York, unfortunately, after Zachary, there really wasn't any horror hosts for the most part. In the 80s, Morgus the Magnificent from New Orleans was syndicated for about a year, but that was kind of past the age that I was really into them. So I never really had a horror host of my own. So I always liked horror and horror movies and, the more fun elements of it, like the monsters and the toys and games and the old Monster Squad TV show and the cartoons. So I was always drawn to more of the imagery of horror-related things and even the movies themselves, even though I enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was, since I really didn't have any horror hosts in my area, I didn't grow up with them. And I discovered them a few years back, and it was just a revelation that they were still doing it.
Yeah, it's funny because even though I'm in LA, I am in LA by way of Jersey. So, and I'm guessing that we're around the same age or within the, maybe within a few years, because I know what you mean. When people say horror host, to me, I think of more the more recent horror hosts like Joe Bob Briggs, Elvira, and Chiller Theater. For me, was the clay hand coming out of the quicksand,
right,
and grabbing the Chiller name, and then that was what horror was for me on television. So I know what you mean. It's kind of one of those things. I think we kind of missed out on the heyday there. So, as you started to discover horror hosts, was there someone that you zeroed in on, or how did you come about getting interested?
Well, I'm a night owl by nature, and I was flicking around the TV stations a few years back, hit across the public access channel, and there was this really weird black and white show with this vampire and a hunchback and little kids dancing. Watched it for a few minutes, kept flipping through, and I said, okay, I got to go back to this. So I went back to it, was watching it. It ended, like 20 minutes later, and I made sure I read the credits to see what this was, and it wound up being Goulfinger. So I made sure I wrote that down, tuned in the same time next week. The show wasn't on. I hit the internet to research them and found their website, found out that their time slot actually changed that week. The episode I saw was the last one in that time slot, and they had a new time slot the next week. So I tuned in the next week after that and fell in love with the show from there on, and started doing research on them on the internet, and found out that they were part of this whole group, the Horror Host Underground, where there's horror hosts all over the place. And doing further research, I found out there's a lot more than was even listed on there, and they're all over the country. So I just started finding out about them, found clips online, and this is going back, I think it was around 2006, so there was less videos even online then. Now you can get full shows and clips and all kinds of downloads, but back then there wasn't really that much out there. But the amazing thing for me was there are these guys doing shows like this, and they all have their own unique characters, they have their own shows and their own followings, and some of them really embrace the old school style of horror hosts where they had fan clubs and merchandise. So that was really a fun thing to discover.
So as you're discovering all this information, was it then that you thought about creating a website dedicated to horror hosts?
It actually stemmed off of my MySpace page, because I was finding that since there wasn't any real episodes there was very few episodes that could be viewed online. There were a lot of streaming stations that would have horror hosts scheduled on their schedule, and you'd be able to watch the full episodes online. So I created the web guide, so it was kind of a TV guide of what horror hosts were on what live streams, so I could keep in touch and make sure I'd catch them. So I had it on there, and then I decided that I couldn't find any website that had the information that I was looking for, the reviews, the new hosts, where to go to find anything. Mm-hmm. So I started the website, and it's still the only real place you can find all the information quickly, because the way I find it is I'm tied into MySpace and Facebook and other websites, and just because of the connections I've made, sometimes I'll find out about a new host that's starting up. I even find out about hosts that have been around for a while that I didn't know about, just because they're friends with somebody else and so on. So unless you're tied in with that, or you're actively looking for a specific host, you're not going to be able to find it anywhere. So that's why I really created the website, because there was nothing that was doing that for me. There's Igor's website, which is really good, but his is more of a Wikipedia type, where the information's listed by host. So if you're looking for a host, you'll find information about it, but there's nothing to say, hey, look, there's somebody new starting up.
Yeah. Did it surprise you that there really were no websites, or other than yours and Igor's, that discussed horror hosts, or were dedicated to horror hosts? Did it surprise you?
It still surprises me. With the internet, there's a billion websites for everything, and there's really only two major horror host related websites out there, which is the Horror Host Graveyard and the Igor site. The other ones are usually regionally specific, So they'll have ones about Syracuse horror hosts or horror hosts from California, but there's none other than those two that do general horror hosts, and, you know, from every part of the country and the world too.
Yeah. Yeah, it is surprising because, I mean, does it say something about how maybe, I mean, do you think that it says something in terms of like the legacy of horror hosts, in terms of, you know, interest out there, or do you think it's just one of those things that, you know, maybe people just rely on your site and Igor's site and that's it?
Well, I think it really has been such a regional thing, and it's always been a regional thing going way back from the beginning.
Yeah.
The internet's expanding it out, but you know, they're on public access in a few markets or in one market, or there's a couple of hosts around the country that are actually on the network, so it's not easy for them to find. But it seems to be everybody who's made aware of it, they really enjoy it, but it all comes as a shock to them that it exists.
Yeah.
You know, no one really knows that these hosts are even in their area on TV doing this, and when they find out, they're like, oh, this is great. And I hear that from hosts all over the place. You know, once they get found, people love it, but even people who regularly have them on TV don't know that they're on TV because there's no advertising push. They're not on the major networks. So it's really, I always say it's a subgenre of a subgenre. You know, it's the horror hosts are under the horror genre, which is, you know, under the bigger genres. So it's really hard to get that focus onto the host. That's, you know, another reason why I have my site, because I want to put that focus on, hey, there's a host, you're interested in horror hosts, you go here, oh look, there's one on TV in your area.
So, how many horror hosts do you have right now on your website?
I have no idea.
So a lot.
There's so many hosts, and like I said, I do past hosts, present hosts, and future hosts. So there's ones that I have on my list to put on that haven't been on there yet. I know there's hosts that are being worked on that I haven't put up yet because I really don't have anything to show. You know, the list is endless, and I'm always finding new hosts. Even like I had said earlier, there's hosts that have been doing it for years that I still haven't found out about. And I get shocked. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know he's been doing it for 3 or 4 years. So, you know, I couldn't even start to count. And I've been finding ones from other countries. I found one called Wild Hildy from Germany. And there were clips online of her doing her hosting thing in German. And I put that up on the site because that fascinated me.
Sure. So have you been able to get a lot of great archive stuff on, you know, the original horror hosts back in the 50s and 60s, or is it something that is still a little elusive because of the time period and the archiving of a lot of those live shows?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. A lot of the old horror hosts, they didn't record them. Some of them were broadcast live and they were never recorded. It's amazing that there's a significant amount of some of the hosts still existing, you know, so that footage still existing of them, but very few of them have more than a couple of shows. Some of the big horror hosts don't have much at all. Zachary has, think about maybe 4 or 5 shows, one from when he was back in Philadelphia as Roland. Vampira herself, there's no full episodes left. There was a few, I think it's about 5 to 7 minutes worth of clips that were used in a sales promotional reel that somehow survived, and that's the only thing that exists of her being a horror host.
Wow. Speaking of Vampira, with the Vampira Tribute coming up, and I'll ask you a little bit later if you're going to be there or not. What does Vampira mean to you? I mean, here we're having this big tribute, and someone who is obviously, you know, you've seen probably as much as, you know, Michael Monahan has seen of horror hosts. What does she mean to you?
She is one of the innovators. You know, she started around the same time as Zachary. She did kind of her own thing, and that's what most of the early hosts did. They just had these movies, they created their characters, and they just did it, and they were able to market themselves and promote themselves. And she was only a horror host for about a year, and she made a name for herself as Vampira, mostly through her modeling, because her show was only shown in California. It wasn't shown across the country. So the fact that people know of her and know of her work is, an attest to her way of self-promotion.
Now, with the birth of the internet, have you found that, especially now, as we're in 2010, have you been finding that there are a lot more horror hosts now starting to really come up? And like you said, there are some that you know about that you haven't posted yet because they really don't have anything yet. But do you find that there's a sudden rise in people wanting to become horror hosts online?
Yes, there definitely is. Part of that is the internet, but also it's the technology. You buy a computer with Windows on it, you have decent video editing software, you buy a webcam, and you have enough technology right there to make a show. Also, the websites like Internet Archive, you can download movies, so they have decent quality movies, public domain movies that they can download. They film a few things with their character on their little set in their basement with their webcams, throw it all into a computer, and they've made a show. And they can put that on the internet where thousands of people would see it, where normally nobody would even consider doing something like that. Mm-hmm. So yes, definitely the internet and the technology is making these hosts pop up almost on a weekly basis now.
Wow.
But the amazing thing with them is, since there's so many people doing it, the quality is sometimes low, but sometimes the quality is really up there, mm-hmm. because they're seeing what other people can do and they're trying to top that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, have you ever been given or come across something that you go, oh, this is god awful. I can't even post this on my site?
I've seen quite a few, and there have been some that are like, ooh, wow, this is what you're doing. But my website doesn't play favorites.
Sure.
If it's out there, I'm going to put it out there. Yeah. If it sucks, if it's good, it's going to be out there. I may focus more on some that I like more, but usually the ones I focus on more are the ones that do more shows, or they're more out there, so that there's more for me to put out there. If you have a host show, some of these hosts have had shows for years and they have 3 clips out online. I can't keep posting the same 3 clips all the time, so sure. They're not going to get as much attention as somebody who's posting clips every month.
As far as new horror hosts go, who out there would you recommend to listeners out there that either don't watch horror hosts or might be looking to find some new horror hosts? Who would you recommend?
You see, that's a difficult thing, because horror hosts, and I've realized this, it's kind of like going into Baskin Robbins. Mm-hmm. You have all the different flavors, and not everybody's going to like a specific flavor. Yeah. Every horror host is different. They have a different style. They have a different feeling of their show. There's ones like Dr. Sarkophagus. He's relaunching his show right now, but his older shows, they're really funny, but they look very raw, but the actual character and what's there is great and funny. There's other ones that are really have good production values, but they don't produce that much, or they don't really have their act together. So there's all different versions of the horror host, like Ormond Grimsby from Monster Creature Feature. He really skating the line between the really classic type of host and the modern host, because he still does it black and white. His is a very simple set, but he has modern bands on there like Psychocharger and the Ghastly Ones, and he interviews artists like Eric Pigors, and he embraces the internet. But his show, pretty much if you threw it on 20, 30, or even 50 years ago, it kind of would still fit in. Mm-hmm. But that's the whole thing, is you have to try different ones to see what you like. There's all different types, like Gunther Dedman from the Basement Sublet of Horror. He edits his movies in with educational films, commercials, so he's creating a whole new movie that he's even showing. So it all really depends on what you're looking for.
Do you find that a lot of the new horror hosts, and I know you've mentioned that, people are finding public domain movies and they're doing their bits around that. But because of YouTube, short attention spans, as they keep getting shorter by the hour, do you find that a lot of the new horror hosts don't even try to do wraps around movies anymore, that they just basically do a 5 to 10 minute bit and they go, here it is, and off we go, kind of thing?
Yeah, some of them... Oh, sorry.
No.
Some of them do that. Some of them are hosting only trailers because of the rights issues, because trailers, for the most part, are public domain where the movies aren't, so they're able to get some different types of things for them to host, so they're not hosting the same 30, 40 movies every other host is doing. Mm-hmm. Some of them will pull cartoons or old TV shows, or some horror hosts won't even just stick to the horror genre. They'll do science fiction or different Italian gangster movies, ones like El Vado and Uncle Pete from the Dark Vault of Public Domain. They host pretty much every type of movie, blaxploitation movies, horror, everything. But they're still considered horror hosts, because even back when the original horror host existed, the main package, the shock package that came out, that wasn't all horror movies. It was some mystery. It was kind of like anything that they could throw in there. So there is a legacy of that. So they are trying to vary what they show, because maybe you're not totally interested in the host all the time, but you want to see the movie. They'll try to get an audience like that. And at the Horror Host Graveyard right now, we've just launched the Films at Horror Host Graveyard, where we're trying to get independent filmmakers, either shorts or feature films, to submit for either limited viewing or full-on free viewing rights or showing rights to the horror hosts, where they're going to get the host hosting it, getting it out, getting their films and their products out to a broader audience than they've had before. And these hosts are just waiting for something like that to show up. And if any filmmakers out there are interested, just go to films.horrorhostgraveyard.com, and there's information there and the form to fill out, and you just send that in, and then we're working on a release to all the hosts to say, we have this film available. You can show it for 2 weeks on your show. You can show it for a month on your show, and hopefully that'll get more attention on both ends of the host and the films.
Wow, that's a great idea. So obviously, with the amount of research that you've done, for every one or two successful horror host, I'm sure there are many, like in many professions, there are many that don't achieve the success and they kind of just move on to something else. Is there a type of what I guess the question would be, what does it take to become a successful horror host that you have seen, at least?
It's mostly you just have to, well, for one thing, since it's so hard to get noticed out there, you have to hustle. You have to have a great website. You have to post clips everywhere. You have to get out in the public, go to conventions, go to events, get the public to know you exist. That's the first thing. Besides that, you have to have an underlying good product. If you have a crappy show, you're not going to have people continue to view it. But you have to have something good and definitely get people to view it, because if no one's viewing it, it's not going to be popular ever.
Sure. So what has the response been from the horror hosting community regarding your website? Have you gotten a response, from horror hosts, especially the established horror hosts, from the old television days?
It falls into two different categories. There's ones that don't know I exist, even though I posted on it, and then sometimes they find out many months later, or sometimes never even have heard of it. They're on the site and they don't know it exists, and they're happy that somebody's out there promoting them. The newer hosts, they're really happy that somebody's giving them the attention, especially specific attention. There's last year a bunch of hosts that popped up, and even this year already we've had a few, and I put them up there, and I'll get an email from them saying, "Oh, you finally put me on the site. Thank you so much. I finally made it." And I never even realized that it was that big of a deal. I was just trying to get, their show out there for people to see, but they totally embraced the website.
Yeah, because ironically enough, with the internet, as easy it is to get stuff out there, it's probably even more difficult now because you do get lost in that sea of internet between YouTube and websites and Twitter and Facebook and MySpace. I can only imagine how much more difficult it is now for the newer hosts than it was for the hosts on TV to get noticed, because back then they were on local stations, and there were how many local stations,
Oh yeah. There was, dozen or so stations, and pretty much somebody was going to click on you at some point. When you have billions of websites and trillions of clips, there's no way of finding them easily. And that, once again, that's why I have the site, because if you're looking for a horror host, you think you may be interested in one, you go to my site and you're going to find somebody. And if you even marginally like a horror hosting in general, you're going to find somebody on the site that appeals to you on some level. But if you were trying to look for a horror host, there's no way of finding a specific one, because they're not called like horror host this or horror host that. They have their own show names and their own character names.
Yeah.
So it's no way of just throwing it into a search engine and saying, oh, look, there's this one.
Did you ever come across some archive, or did you ever get an archive that was sort of like the Holy Grail for you?
One clip I found last year on YouTube, I didn't even know it existed, was Zachary on American Bandstand doing his Dinner with Drac as a kind of full-on music video with Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff. I didn't know it existed, and when I found it, my jaw dropped. I'm like, wow. Nice.
Speaking of Zachary, and since you do live in the New York area, when Zachary came back a few years ago to host Chiller Theater for WPIX, did you go at all, or did you contact him at all, or?
I go to the Chiller Theater convention that they have twice a year in New Jersey, where Zach is the guest of honor. So I've talked to him many times. I've watched him perform on stage with the Dead Elvi singing songs, which is an amazing thing to see. So I've talked to him. I've dealt with him. I know a lot of people that have worked with him, like Mike Gilks, who's done the last 2 CDs that Zachary did. So he, even though he wasn't my horror host because he was so long before I was even born. Like I said earlier, my dad grew up with him. I always knew of Zachary. I had gotten the Horrible Horrors video back in the 80s. He did pop up on TV a few times, during my lifetime. So just seeing him in person and seeing him on TV again was great. Although I was actually at the convention that weekend that the show was on, so I had to tape it and watch it later. But I think it was a fair trade-off to see him in person than to watch him on TV.
I agree. Now, speaking of course, horror hosts aplenty, Vampira Tribute is this weekend. Can we expect to see you there?
I will definitely be there. We'll be all over the place, hopefully, because different hosts want me to either share the tables with them or... Well, part of the whole weekend is they're showing a marathon of horror movies from Friday night until Sunday night. So different hosts are going to be hosting different movies on the web throughout the whole weekend. So some of them will be pre-taped, but most of them will be live. So I might be sitting in on a few of those as well.
Oh, that's great.
But I'll also be there with my Horror Host Graveyard trading cards. Series 2 is being debuted there. So it's another set of 10 cards with different horror hosts on it. I'll have Series 1 there as well. So that's their premiere at that convention.
And I'm sure you're going to be bringing your camera and video camera and everything else and getting a lot of stuff that we can expect to see on Horror Host Graveyard within the next couple of weeks, I would think.
Oh, yeah. I'm hoping to try to maybe even film enough host segments to host a full-length movie, and I'll post that up. But we'll see what kind of chaos is going on there to be able to get people on the side to do that. But I'll definitely be filming as much as I can, because there'll probably never be as many hosts together as this weekend will be.
Yeah, I know. It's an event of a lifetime. It really is. I wish I could be there, but I will live vicariously through you and everyone else that's there. Chris, it was great having you on the show. I really, really appreciate you spending some time to come on in. Actually, before I go, I want to ask you, you worked with Patrick Devaney on Zombie Hunters.
Yes.
So what did you do on that?
I do PR for him. I try to get him interviews and get him out there. I'm part of his crew in that way. But I also did a one-day stint as an extra zombie on an upcoming episode. And I also filmed behind-the-scenes footage of that day, which will be edited at some point to a half-an-hour special, which hopefully will be on the second DVD that'll come out later in this year.
That's awesome. And what was it like? What was it like playing a zombie?
Oh, it was fun. I mean, I'm going to give you a spoiler, but I actually got killed, so I had to be all wired up and with blood and get shot. And the makeup was pretty much a full makeup. I had a wig and arms covered in burned, scarred flesh. Mike Scardillo, he does the special effects for the show. He did an amazing job. It was really disgusting. I mean, even Patrick was looking at me going, "Oh," so.
Yeah, that's when you know it's good, right?
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, Patrick was on the show about a year ago. It's great having him on. We're going to have him and some of the other folks, part of Zombie Hunters, on the show later in the year. You also did DVD commentary for Night of the Living Dead Reanimated.
Yes, that is one of the springboards to having the public domain, the independent films try to replace some of the public domain films that the host can show, because that film is being offered to all horror hosts for them to be able to be shown as a movie on their show for a limited time, and then later on they'll be able to show it also after it's been released on DVD. But the DVD is coming out, I think, next month in April, and Count Gore is hosting it on the DVD, but one of the commentaries they wanted to discuss how horror hosting fits in with this. And there's been a few horror hosts already that have hosted it, and they've done it in their own way. So they wanted to go and discuss how that type of film would fit in with horror hosts, and even the history of horror hosts, since Night of the Living Dead is probably the premier public domain film that gets shown by every horror host.
Yeah, and Count Gore was I think he was, if I remember correctly from a week ago, my memory's getting bad, he was the first horror host to show it on television, I believe.
Yeah, I think he was the first one to show the full unedited version of it, too.
Yeah, it's amazing. It always comes back. Night of the Living Dead is always sort of like the center of the universe. It's amazing. It always seems to crop up somewhere at some interview. So, Chris, the website again is horrorhostgraveyard.com, and you mentioned that people want to buy the trading card set.
The trading card sets.
Yep.
There's series 1 and 2, 10 cards each, randomly inserted autograph cards. You just go right on the website. You'll see them up there. Like I said, the series 2 is debuting this weekend, and they'll also be available on the website. So you get 20 different horror hosts through the two series, going back from Zachary and Count Gregor, who both started in the 50s, to Marlena Midnight, who started last year. So it's a good broad range of different types of hosts and hosts from all over the country.
He is Corpse S. Chris. He is the man who runs horrorhostgraveyard.com. Chris, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you have an awesome time at Vampira Tribute, and we'll definitely have you back on the program again down the road.
Great. It was fun being here, and your graveyard here is just about as comfy as mine.
I want to again thank Corpse S. Chris from horrorhostgraveyard.com for leaping the fence from his graveyard into my graveyard. It was awesome having him on the show, something I've been looking forward to for a long time, and it was great having him here. And he will definitely be back in the near future to talk about horror hosts plenty. And also, I can't wait to hear about how Vampira Tribute was, because I have a funny feeling he's going to be very, very popular there. But can you believe that we're finishing the first quarter of the year already? We're 25% into the new year. therefore making it not so new. Unbelievable how quickly time flies. Now, last week I had mentioned this on the show. I just recently found this out, and I am pleased to say that the Graveyard Show podcast has been nominated for a Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Award. It is shocking to me that that we've been nominated for something. This is really, really cool. We are nominated for Best Horror Podcast, whether it's audio or video. And I am extremely honored to be one of 12 in this category, considering how many horror podcasts there are out there. I don't know who nominated us. I don't know how it happened. I want to thank whoever it was or however many people there were for this honor. The others nominated in this category are Cult Radio A Go-Go, Deadpit.com, Fangoria Radio, Fearshop.com, our friends over at Mail Order Zombie, Midnight Podcast, TheMonsterClub.com, All Time Radio, Rotting Flesh Radio, Rue Morgue Radio, Without Your Head, and then they have a dial-in if you want to nominate or vote for somebody else. So really, we're one of 11. So that I have to say, I'm really thrilled to be in this category with all these other great shows. I want to congratulate the other nominees, and when we have the nominees luncheon the day before the awards, I can't wait to meet everybody. Oh wait, I'm sorry, that's a wrong award show. That's the Academy Awards. Sorry, I got carried away. But not only do I want to thank everybody over at Rondo Hatton for this honor, I want to thank all of you out there that are either listening for the first time or have been following the show for a short period of time, long period of time since its inception. I want to thank everybody out there because obviously without you, the listener, there is no show. And of course I have to thank my guests as well because, well, without them, there'd be no show. So without my guests, without my great listening audience out there, there would be no Graveyard Show. So thank you, everybody out there. I really, truly mean this from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank everybody out there for supporting the show for these last 15 months. It has been a special, special ride for me hosting this show. And I have to thank, of course, The Undertaker for doing such a great job while I'm away, and also with his new associate producer, credit here on the show. He's working very hard behind the scenes as well, putting shows together here at the Graveyard Show. So I want to thank everybody. It started off as a one-man show. It has now grown to a two-man show. We've doubled our employees here in the Graveyard. But again, I want to thank everybody. This is really, I think I fell out of my chair when I first found this. I wasn't notified. I just came across it by accident. Also, I also found out that the Graveyard Show is the 20th most popular horror podcast out there, and I'll take that any day of the week. As far as horror podcasts, I don't know if I said podcast. That would be a pipe dream. Overall podcast. 20th most popular horror podcast. Thank you again, everybody out there, for supporting the show. It really is truly an honor for me to bring you interviews each and every week, and it's an honor to be interviewing all these great independent filmmakers and folks who put together horror conventions and film festivals and directors and writers and everybody. Thank you so much. And who knows? I mean, who knows what'll happen? I'm not expecting to get the award, but I think if I did get the award, I think my head would explode. So with pure and utter shock and happiness. So I'm hoping I don't, so my head doesn't explode. Anyway, so thank you everybody out there. I think that's it. I think I'm done here. So if you're listening to the show from Vampira, what are you doing listening to this show? You're at the Vampira Tribute. You're at Horror Hound Weekend. Go have some fun. And to everybody else out there who can't make indie, don't forget 100 years of horror movies online. Go check it out. Go to horrorhoundweekend.com for that. We wrap up the month of March. We wrap up our unofficial horror host month here. It has been a blast. It's been great. I've had a thrilling time all week. Again, thank you, Chris. All righty, my friends. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. And the Twitter site, twitter.com/graveyard show if you want to follow any of our tweets. We do a couple a week. That's it. Show updates. That's basically it. And the website, graveyardshow.com. That is graveyardshow.com. You can find the show on iTunes, Podbean, Podcast Alley. If you want to vote for us at the Rondo Hatton, for the Rondo Hatton Awards, go to Rondo Award. That's singular. RONDOAWARD, no S, D for Dracula.com. And you can, I think you get one vote. That's it. You can't go on and vote multiple times. What else? I think that's everything. We're part of a lot of other, websites out there that I cannot recall off the top of my head. Of course, Horror Malls, The Haunt, All Things Scary, and stay tuned over these next few months. Find out how you can be on the Graveyard Show podcast, but you got to listen to the whole show because you never know where I may drop it. You just never know. And no, it's not a call number, but you never know. Someday that might happen too. Alrighty, my friends, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy Vampira if you're there. If you're listening to this after Vampira, I hope you had a great time. As you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.
The end of another award season, and we are going out classy.
And classic. It is time for the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards.
Talk about classy.
This is the 8th annual Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards, honoring the best in monster research, creativity, and film preservation.
Like I said, classy.
If you head over to rondoaward.com, you can find the ballot for all the nominees in all the different categories. And we've got categories like Best Movie of 2009, Best Television Program, Best DVD TV Presentation, Best DVD Commentary, Independent Productions, Magazines, Magazine Covers, Magazine Articles, Podcasts.
Yeah, they cover everything.
They do. Head over to rondoaward.com, and while you're filling out your ballot, you're going to be taking notes because there's all sorts of books and magazines and movies that you're going to want to see based on their nominees.
You're going to lose hours of your life, but you're going to love it. RondoAward.com is a classic, fantastic resource. What headshot rating would Mail Order Zombie give?
Mail Order Zombie would give the Rondo Hatton Awards about 5 headshots out of 5. Make sure you guys head over to Rondo Award, that's RONDOAWARD.com, and vote. Voting continues through April 3rd, 2010. You don't have to vote in every category, and only one vote per monster.
Winners announced April 4th.
I can't wait to see who wins. I mean, come here, look at these magazine covers. These are pretty good. Oh, seriously, look.
Good evening, friends of the undead. I am the Deacon of Darkness, the posthumous pimp, Freakshow, and the always vivacious Vivian. Bordello of Horror's going on the road.
That's right, ghouls and gals. Bordello of Horror is headed to Horror Hound Weekend in the Vampira Tribute.
Horror hosts from around the world are going to unite and pay homage to the queen goddess of horror hosting, Vampira.
The lineup of ghastly ghouls includes Elvira Jova Briggs and Dr. Goulfinger.
Count Gore Helena, the hussy of horror, and Son of Ghoul will be in attendance as well.
Horror Hound Weekend, March 26th through the 28th at the Marriott East in Indianapolis.
You know, I really wish you were coming with us, Vivian, but I'll be joined with the always delightfully demented June the Meat Cleaver.
For the complete event schedule, guest and ticket information, visit VampiraTribute.com.
That's right, get your freak on with Freakshow and June the Meat Cleaver at Horror Hound Weekend's Vampira Tribute, March 26th through the 28th at the Marriott East in Indianapolis.